The regular season is finally here as the Houston Rockets get ready to tip off their 2021-2022 NBA campaign on the road against the Minnesota Timberwolves. It's going to be a really fun game. I'm expecting a high-flying, high-scoring endeavor between these two basketball teams. Who ultimately gets the starting nod for the Houston Rockets? What does this team look like? What do the rotations look like? What are the expectations for this game? All of that and more coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start.
With the second pick in the 2021 NBA Draft, the Houston Rockets select Jalen Green.
T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal.
I'm going to keep working. I'm going to keep getting better every day. I'm going to keep perfecting my craft. And every time I step on that floor, I'm coming.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Houston Rockets basketball is back, and we're not talking preseason anymore. This is the real deal. What's up, and welcome to another episode of Locked On Rockets, the best and only daily podcast covering your Houston Rockets. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and partner at Apollo Media. Be sure to follow along on Twitter at JT Gatlin, the show, of course, at Locked On Rockets, as well as at Apollo HOU. We got a loaded show today, got a bunch of different topics I want to go through, kind of the expectations going into the season opener for the Houston Rockets, some of the questions that I have burning at the forefront of my mind of how this team is going to approach this very first game of the season, just some thoughts, some, ideas about how they're going to, tackle things. What are we going to see out of this game, right? What version of this team are we going to see, as well as I need a place to throw out my picks for the season, my NBA season award picks. So I'll get to those in the final segment, my thoughts on who wins each respective award. Spoiler alert, I think the Rockets are in the running for 2 awards this season. So we'll get there we'll get to that spot, in segment 3. But where I want to start first is, what starting lineup are we going to get against the Minnesota Timberwolves, right? What version of the Houston Rockets starters are we going to see? Now, it's worth noting that Daniel Theis Jr. is not with the team due to personal reasons. Recently had a baby, so congratulations to Daniel Theis Jr., but he is not with the team, so we won't see the iteration of the starting lineup involving Daniel Theis Jr. I think that was a bit of a long shot anyways. Now, we do know, as Salman Ali was reporting the other day, that Eric Gordon has looked good in practice and is expected to be with the Houston Rockets and available to play in the season opener. So I largely believe we're going to see the version of the starting lineup involving Eric Gordon. So KPJ, Jalen Green, Eric Gordon at the 3 spot, Christian Wood, and Daniel Theis. So that said, we only saw that starting lineup for like a little bit in the very first preseason game against the Wizards, and honestly, didn't look phenomenal. And that's going to be my biggest question for, this game is, okay, which starters are we getting? Which I think it's going to be that starting lineup. And then 2, how do they actually look playing off of each other? Because they haven't gotten any reps together. They got the brief stint of time against the Wizards, and that was the very first preseason game. Guys are knocking off a lot of rust. And I'm really interested in how that group of 5 guys plays together, mainly because I look at that group and the one distinct thing missing out of that group of 5 guys is playmaking. And that's where my ultimate concern falls. And look, the Şengün squad is going to be pumping their fists in the air saying, start Şengün over Theis. And then there's me in my corner saying, Jae'Sean Tate should start at the 3 spot. And I'm sure there's a bunch of people who agree with me on that one instead of Eric Gordon. Both those guys bring a level of playmaking. And I have another point that I want to follow up on with both of those guys in a moment. But looking at that starting lineup, I don't know if it's going to be effective enough without playmaking from multiple positions, right? KPJ is your primary facilitator. He's the guy that's going to have the ball in his hands the majority of the time. Offensively, he's going to bring the ball up the court, set up the plays, do all of that, right? He's got point guard duties. That said, Jalen Green can facilitate a little bit, but that's the area of his game that he really has to, focus on and grow. And it's not polished yet, right? He's not a comfortable facilitator. He's not somebody that you can just give the ball to and say, hey, make a play happen for us. EG, similar thing. he can create a little bit for others, but he's not somebody that can effectively, you give the ball to and really run the offense through comfortably and reliably. I think EG's more so, again, he can get his and sometimes create for others depending on how the defense decides to guard him, but I don't see him as a true facilitator. Then you've got Christian Wood, who's been working on his ability to create for his teammates, sure, and I want to see that area of his game grow as well, but still not, super flourished in that department as well. And then you've got Daniel Theis, who doesn't really show that ability or hasn't shown that ability in his brief stint so far. I don't expect it to show up in game one of the regular season after we didn't see much of it at all, if any, in the first 4 preseason games. So ultimately, my worry with that version of the starting lineup is that there's not enough secondary creators after, Kevin Porter Jr. to continue breaking down the defense, right? To continue, getting the ball moving around, creating for others. And I worry about how that lineup is ultimately going to mesh together. Now, the argument for putting Eric Gordon in there is he is arguably the Rockets' best player, arguably their best defender, one of their best shooters when he's on. He's one of their best floor spacers. The efficiency has been kind of in the tanker, unfortunately, for a while for EG from beyond the arc, but defenses still respect him. And he also, can saddle himself, 3, 4, 5 steps behind the 3-point line, which really pulls defenses further out, opens things up a bit more. So hopefully that's the goal with potentially starting Eric Gordon, is having that level of spacing in the offense so things don't feel nearly as cluttered as they have at times when they've had a Jae'Sean Tate out there at the same time as a Daniel Theis, right? And things kind of get a little mucky offensively, unfortunately, for the Houston Rockets. So I'm going to be looking at that and how that offensive line, how that starting lineup really meshes together offensively, whether or not they truly complement each other, or if things feel a little rigid if everything's having to go through KPJ because he's the only facilitator on the floor. The other thing that I'm looking for, my next point in, because I've got five or six things written down here that I'm really paying attention to. How effective is Daniel Theis defensively? Right. The whole premise of bringing Daniel Theis in was to be the defensive anchor, to really kind of buoy this Rockets team and give them a defensive voice, a defensive quarterback, somebody that Christian Wood can lean on. That way he doesn't have to be tasked with guarding the bigger, stronger centers in the league. That way he can play his more so natural position at the 4 spot, all these things, right? So this will be a good test for Daniel Theis going up against Karl-Anthony Towns. What does he look like going up against Cat, right? Is he actually seemingly effective in guarding Cat in one-on-one coverages? Do they decide to blitz Cat occasionally and double team him? Do they force the ball out of his hands? How do they ultimately scheme defensively for the Timberwolves, who are a very potent offensive team? How do they shut down Karl-Anthony Towns? What do they look like guarding Anthony Edwards? How do they slow down D'Lo, right? All these different things. Worth noting, Rockets will not have to face former fan favorite Patrick Beverley because of Beverley's antics in the finals, shoving Chris Paul, not the finals, the Western Conference Finals, shoving Chris Paul in the back, for those of you who will remember that very Patrick Beverley-esque moment during last season's playoffs. So Beverley is under a 1-game suspension, so he will not be available for the Minnesota Timberwolves. But again, bringing me back to Daniel Theis, I want to see, through preseason, and again, it's preseason, so I'm not trying to, harp on things too much, but ultimately, I need to see out of Daniel Theis somebody who is invaluable as a defender. If that's where he's going to hang his hat on this team as somebody who is, supposed to be the anchor of the defense, all these things, right, to kind of help this younger Rockets squad along. For his shortcomings offensively, unfortunately the not, lights out 3-point shooting, the, somewhat limited offensive repertoire, the slightly limited offensive bag, the inability to really run the offense through him, similarly to Christian Wood or Alperen Şengün. Kind of, again, they're hamstrung a little bit offensively with what they can do with Theis on the floor. So I need to see a step or two more out of him, a step or two higher out of him defensively to make me think that it's worth it to have him in that starting lineup long term, right? Because there's already a subsection of Rockets fans clamoring for Alperen Şengün to start over Daniel Theis. I think it's a little premature for that, and I think that you absolutely need veterans in the lineup alongside KPJ alongside Jalen Green, Christian Wood. You need some balance with this team, which is why I think they're leaning Eric Gordon and why I think they're going to start Daniel Theis and kind of have that balance in the starting five. But that said, if Daniel Theis plays 10, 20 games or so, and we're not seeing, invaluable output on the defensive side of the basketball from what he brings to the table, then yeah, I'm going to be one of the first people calling for starting Şengün over Theis as early as possible. But I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt for now and see how things plan out. So those are a couple of things that I'm looking for. I've got a couple more topics here coming up in just a second, and we'll get there after a quick message from our friends over at Sweatblock. Because look, sweating sucks. It just does, right? We live in Houston, Bayou City, or I live in Houston. It's Bayou City for a reason. It's humid, it's hot, it's gross outside. If you're running around, going, meeting up with friends, running errands, maybe just grocery shopping, going out on a date, right? You don't want to be worried about what you're wearing and worrying about if you're going to sweat through your clothes or not. Sweatblock is great. It's doctor created, doctor recommended. It works for up to 7 days per application. You just put it on right before you go to bed at night, right? Throw it on right before you go to bed, wake up the next morning, shower, go about your day. Put your makeup on, get dressed, all that good stuff. And you don't have to worry about going through your day with any kind of sweat, right? They have a dry shirt guarantee where if Sweatblock doesn't help you out, they will give you your money back, no questions asked. It stops excessive sweat for up to 7 days per application. Again, doctor created, doctor recommended, not just for under here, right? Not just for under the armpits. You can do your chest, back, feet, hands, anywhere that sweats, that makes you uncomfortable, that you're worried about, right? So if you or someone you care about is dealing with excessive sweat, you've got to check out Sweatblock. Get it today for 20% off at sweatblock.com with promo code LOCKEDON, also available at Amazon and CVS. So again, that's promo code LOCKEDON for 20% off at sweatblock.com. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball, where hopefully we are your first listen of the day, free and available on every single platform you can imagine: Apple, Spotify, Google, the brand new Odyssey app, also our brand new YouTube channel. Check us out there. But continuing down our list of things that, we're looking for out of this first Rockets game, the season opener, not the home opener, home opener Friday against the OKC Thunder, which is going to be a really exciting game. Two teams in the cellar of the Western Conference really duking it out. It's going to be all kinds of fun. And look, there's a lot of history between the OKC franchise and the Houston Rockets franchise. So that's always a fun matchup. But continuing down this list of points that I have, that, things that I'm looking for that we should be hoping to see out of this Rockets season opener, aggressiveness from Jalen Green, right? We kind of saw, spurts of aggressiveness throughout the preseason. And then we saw that moment where somebody got in his ear, somebody said something to him at halftime of the final preseason game against the Spurs, and he came out in that third quarter and looked like an entirely different basketball player. He looked like the Jalen Green that was torching the G League and torching grown men at a professional level at just 19 years old. He looked like the number 2 overall pick in the NBA draft. I think that the really intense defenses of the Miami Heat and the Toronto Raptors really had him a little bit deer in headlights, kind of, had him on his heels a little bit, unfortunately. And it's a good learning experience for him to have to go up against really, really tough defenses and see different looks, right? Experience different coverages, right? How are different teams going to play him? Be it man-to-man coverage, be it, blitzing him, throwing double teams at him, collapsing on him when he drives into the paint, all these different things. So seeing him come out in that third quarter against the Spurs and really turn the dial up to 11 and really work to get his shots as well as create for others. And that's the thing that he's going to be able to unlock further down in his career, is as he gets comfortable with his ability to score at all 3 levels at the NBA level, then he's going to be able to create for his teammates. And we saw that on display against the Spurs. He started being extremely aggressive, and after a few made buckets, after a few trips to the free throw line, he was then able to use that gravity of his to start creating for others on the team, to start creating for Christian Wood, to start creating for other guys. So I want to see Jalen Green be aggressive from the jump in this one. It'll be interesting to see who's checking Jalen Green. My assumption would be Anthony Edwards. I feel like that's probably the guy that's going to have to check. That's going to have to check Jalen Green out of the T-Wolves, projected starting lineup. And And so that'll be a fun little back and forth between, runner up for rookie of the year last year and then one of the consensus top selections for, possible rookie of the year this season in Jalen Green. And how does he approach that matchup, right? Anthony Edwards is a big physical player, solid defender. What version of Jalen Green are we going to get? Is he going to, get the ball in his hands and get shut down a couple times and then just give up on the play and kick the ball back out to be reset for somebody else to get an opportunity? Or is he going to really work the side to side dribble, try to drive it in? Okay, can't go right. Okay, we're moving it back left. Okay, let me use my burst of speed. Let me work out of the triple threat a little bit. Like, what are we going to see out of Jalen Green in this matchup? And can he be aggressive from the jump instead of getting, I don't want to say down on himself, but getting shut down early and getting taken out of the offense? That's something that, happens from players time to time, right? We've seen seen that happen with James Harden before, where he's been, largely shut down and taken out of the offense. It doesn't ever happen for a full game. It doesn't ever even, happen for a full quarter, but sometimes there's multiple plays in a row, multiple possessions in a row where a player gets absolutely taken out of what they're trying to do offensively, and it can throw you off your rhythm a little bit. So I want to see Jalen Green be aggressive from the jump, really work to get to his spots and not give up, early in the game, right? If things are difficult, if the shots aren't falling, if he's not able to get to the rim, I want to see and this is part of what the coaching staff has to do too, right? If Jalen can't get his because he's, isoing on the wing or he's coming off pick and roll or something, cool. Get him some off-ball actions, right? Get him going downhill, get him coming off some pin down screens, things to kind of try and open things up for him a little bit more. Give him varying looks. So that way it's not just, we tried a couple things and, Anthony Edwards is shutting down Jalen Green, so we're just not going to go back to him and he's going to have, 6 shot attempts in this game. Not what I want to see in this one. What else? I want to see based on the starting lineup that I think we're going to get with EG and Daniel Theis in the starting spots. I want to see how effective Jae'Sean Tate and Şengün are both off the bench as just playmakers, right? I mean, we know that they can facilitate. We know that they're really, really solid creating for their teammates. So I kind of am optimistic about, okay, if the starting lineup looks like it's faltering a little bit, if things are a little clunky in the starting lineup, then at least there's reason to believe that when the bench unit gets subbed in, and it'll be interesting to see who the first sub is off the bench, right? So if you'll remember back to the very, very first preseason game when Eric Gordon was the starter, Jae'Sean Tate and Daniel Theis Jr. were the 2 first guys off the bench, the first substitution, I think about like the 7-minute mark, and EG hit the bench kind of early. So, and I believe it was EG and Theis who hit the bench early, and they opted to go Jae'Sean Tate, Daniel Theis Jr., which basically was them signaling, okay, we're playing small, we're playing fast, we're going to run, all of that. So I'll be really interested to see who the first substitution is off the bench and what version of the Rockets we shift to after the starting lineup. My assumption is that it'll be something similar and we'll get some version of either Jae'Sean Tate or Alperen Şengün off the bench first in place of Eric Gordon and or Daniel Theis. It's also possible that maybe they opt to go bring in Jae'Sean Tate primarily first for Theis and then run small for a little bit and then bring in Şengün and go back to the double big lineup. Depending on how Stephen Silas wants to run things, how much time does he want to let Christian Wood spin at the 5 spot? How much time does he want to see Christian Wood and Alperen Şengün on the floor together? And then ultimately, right, how fluid does the offense look when you have multiple guys out there who can create for others? I think one of my favorite lineups has been when they have Jalen Green, Kevin Porter Jr., Jae'Sean Tate, Alperen Şengün, Christian Wood, right? That's the starting lineup that a lot of people really want to see. And I feel like that lineup has a lot of complementary pieces. The shooting is still highly suspect. And that's going to be a big question mark for this team looking down the entire roster is, okay, they don't have a lot of certified shooters. They just don't, right? You got Christian Wood, who shot 37% last year. You've got Armani Brooks, who is absolutely a sniper, but he's kind of buried in the guard rotation. And it's not, we're not really sure exactly how many minutes he's going to get on a night-to-night basis, if any, right? Garrison Matthews, still not with the team. New 2-way signing Garrison Matthews. Not going to be available for this game. Also, right, he's a 2-way guy. And even though he's a sharpshooter, I like that the Rockets are trying to bring in some shooters, but they need the actual core pieces of their rotation to establish themselves as consistent outside threats, because otherwise, right, defenses aren't going to honor them. In that same domain, how well do they generate 3-point shots? And this kind of builds off of my last point that I made right there about the playmaking, facilitating from Jae'Sean Tate, Alperen Şengün, and just creating opportunities for each other on the floor. They have not been generating anywhere near enough 3-point attempts. They just haven't. Last year, I believe they were third. They were top 5 for sure. I think it was third in the NBA, in the association, in 3-point attempts per game, right? Very Houston Rockets-y basketball, right? Shoot a lot of threes. But their percentage was not great. So you obviously want to have both the volume and the efficiency behind it, but they just haven't been attempting enough threes throughout the 4 preseason games. It feels like they're struggling to generate them at times. And even more so, they've been struggling to generate corner threes, which is a really, really solid, efficient shot at the NBA level. If you can create corner threes, then you're doing something right offensively. And we haven't seen hardly any of that. In the Spurs game, they didn't generate a single corner three in the first half of that game. And then I complained about it a little bit on Twitter, and then they generated like 2 corner threes in the third quarter. So sometimes you just got to complain a little bit. But no, but I mean, seriously, that's a sign of, okay, is your offense really churning out solid, consistent shots? And at this point, I'm not so much concerned about them making the shots, right? It'd be great if they were actually making the shots. It'd be great if the efficiency was there. Right now, I'm worried about them generating the shots, right? I want to see KPJ running sets, running pick and roll, creating opportunities for his teammates, and churning out good offense, good opportunities, good shots because of that. And if the shots don't fall, I can live with it as long as they're good shots for now, because those are building winning habits, right? Eventually, the shots will fall. You put enough reps in, you get enough time in the gym with a shooting coach, these guys are going to be able to work on their outside shot. They aren't always going to be a subpar 3-point shooting team. Now, some of these guys, maybe, sure, right? I don't have like pie in the sky dreams of every player on this roster becoming a 35% plus 3-point shooter overnight. But as long as the habits are there and the consistency is there as far as generating quality shots, then eventually you can get the right players in those places to make said quality shots over time. Or again, you just coach up the guys that you have and get them in the gym enough to where they're consistent enough with their outside shots. So I want to make sure that I got one more here, and we'll actually save that for behind the break. So coming up, going to talk about the actual rotation, right? Who sees minutes, who doesn't in this game, as well as my picks for this year's NBA season awards. And we'll get there after a quick message from our friends over at Built Bar. Because look, when it comes to protein bars, if you've never had a protein bar that you've actually enjoyed, you got to check out Built Bar. Every single bar, so delicious, so many amazing flavors to choose from. You got raspberry, mint chocolate brownie, chocolate coconut brownie chunk, my personal favorite, German chocolate, cookies and cream. I mean, really, just go down the whole menu, right? Every single flavor sounds amazing. They're all low sugar, low carb, high fiber, high protein. They're great if you're on a keto diet. They're great if you're trying to lose weight. I just, in the mornings, I got my boxes right over there on my counter. Just grab a couple when I'm, rolling out the door in the morning, that kind of thing, right? Grab them when you're headed to the gym, all that kind of stuff. And you can check them out. Just visit built.com and use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off your next order of the best tasting protein bars you will ever try. So again, that's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. And another message from our friends over at Bet Online, because look, BetOnline is back and better than ever. They have a new web interface for the start of basketball season and more props, odds, and lines than ever before. They've also still got you covered for football, both college and professional. They've got you covered for UFC, MMA, NHL. The list goes on and on over at BetOnline. It remains your number one spot for all the action this season. Head to their new updated desktop or mobile website and sign up today to receive a 50% welcome bonus on your very first deposit. Just use promo code LOCKEDON to receive your bonus. So again, promo code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, for a 50% welcome bonus on your very first deposit. Basketball, football, baseball postseason, NHL, boxing, UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Final point here as we're heading into the first game of the season for the Houston Rockets. And, really a gigantic question mark is, what does the rotation look like, right? So we've got the speculative starting lineup, which I think is a fairly safe bet. And we'll find out, couple hours before tip-off from Stephen Silas what the actual starting lineup is going to be. So we'll have some level of confirmation headed into the game. But if we can safely assume, and I feel like it's a pretty safe bet, that the starters are going to be Kevin Porter Jr., Jalen Green, Eric Gordon, Christian Wood, and Daniel Theis, then from there, who else makes the rotation? Because I think you look down this list of guys, and it's really hard to have a full-blown like 10 or even an 11-man rotation. It's tough. So which guys make the cut? Who gets an adequate number of minutes on a nightly basis, and who gets squeezed from the Rockets rotation? I think we can very safely say that Jae'Sean Tate and Alperen Sengun off the bench are easily a part of their rotation. So we're up to 7 already. Now, as far as number of minutes for those guys, that kind of varies, right? Because I'm still of the opinion that I don't necessarily think Daniel Theis is going to be a guaranteed 30 plus minutes a night guy. I kind of see him more in the 20, 25 minutes a night range, and then utilizing Christian Wood a little bit of that 5 spot, utilizing Sengun a little bit of that 5 spot for maybe 15, 20 minutes a night, that kind of thing. So we're up to 7 with Jae'Sean Tate and Alperen Sengun. Now, Daniel Theis Jr. is not with the team, and he may be a guy that might be like on the cusp because he's a guy that's very versatile, right? He brings a lot to the table. He just has struggled being consistent, unfortunately. But when he's on, Daniel Theis Jr. is absolutely a contributing member of this team. And so it remains to be seen whether or not he's actually going to make the rotation, or maybe he gets squeezed out a little bit. So we're at 7. I think DJ Augustin is a safe bet. When you've only got 2 legitimate point guards on the team, and one of them is still learning how to be a point guard in Kevin Porter Jr., you need the calming presence of a DJ Augustin for some spot minutes, right? He's going to play some spot minutes, probably about 5 to 6 minutes a half, maybe 10 to 12 minutes a night behind Kevin Porter Jr. to kind of orchestrate and slow things down a little bit. I think one of the interesting things that they did during preseason, they didn't exclusively play DJ Augustin as the backup to KPJ. They played KPJ alongside DJ Augustin for certain stretches of those preseason games. Now that might just be, something that they were toying around with. Maybe it's not something we actually see during any of the regular season games, but I kind of like that. I like the ability to say, all right, we're going to put another guard out there, a true, a more so true point guard in DJ Augustin, and let KPJ kind of change his looks up a little bit, get him off the ball just a little bit, not excessively off the ball, right? Not like, okay, John Wall's playing, so you're never going to have the ball in your hands off the ball, but more just, okay, here's DJ. He's going to try and set you up for a couple easy opportunities, and he can still be a spot-up three-point shooter, can still stretch out the defense, and you're still going to have the ball in your hands even when he's on the floor a fair bit. So I like that look, and I like those opportunities for KPJ. So we're up to 8 with DJ Augustin, Jae'Sean Tate, and Alperen Sengun. I think at this point, you really start having to look at the rest of the wings on the roster. David Nwaba, KJ Martin. Do they decide to opt for some Armani Brooks minutes, maybe, to get some shooting in the lineup? I kind of don't necessarily see it, at least not right away, maybe situationally, but it's also really tough as a shooter to just get thrown in, right? For, 5 minutes a half, to not be warm, to not get your blood pumping, to just be cold and come off the bench and be expected to start knocking down, at a really consistent rate. I think right now, if we're talking the wings, I think I'm probably still leaning David Nwaba ultimately. I think David Nwaba gives the Rockets some much needed punch off the bench and a different level of physicality, a defensive look that they don't necessarily get out of KJ Martin. I know KJ Martin has largely impressed, especially that stint that he had last season. I think KJ Martin's kind of on the cusp of the rotation right now as somebody who might get a little bit squeezed out, possibly at the end of the Rockets rotation, unfortunately. And that sucks for KJ Martin, because ultimately KJ Martin really showed that he has a lot of promise and that that his potential is through the roof last season. But as things stand right at this very moment, just going down the roster, I think he's the guy that is probably going to get squeezed ultimately. So if you put David Nwaba in there, we're up to 9. And then I think, again, it comes down to when he's available and with the team, who takes up that final 10th spot. Is it Daniel Theis Jr.? Is it KJ Martin for a little bit of short run? Maybe it's Armani Brooks if they want some shooting. And then, hey, Josh Christopher really proved himself throughout preseason. I was very firmly under the impression that Josh Christopher and Usman Garuba were both going to spend significant amount of time at the G League level this season. And now I'm still very convinced of that for Usman Garuba. I think Josh Christopher could be ready for some run, with the team. Maybe he's the 10th guy in the rotation, right? Maybe he's the guy, as part of that, backup guard brigade behind KPJ and Jalen Green alongside DJ Augustine a little bit. Maybe he gets a little bit of burn in there as like the 10th man on the rotation. But again, trying to stretch a rotation all the way out to 10 different guys is tough, right? 9 guys can be a little bit difficult from time to time. And I know that a lot of Rockets fans are conditioned from the Mike D'Antoni era to be here for, short rotations. Maybe there's PTSD from the short rotations and Rockets fans are just like, no, run out like 11, 12 guys every single night. There's like a sweet spot in there. And I think they're going to have to find it because there's so many guys that you can look at on this roster and just say, oh, well, they need some run, right? They need some burn. They need some time on the floor. I do think that Christopher and Garuba are both going to get adequate reps at the G League level. But maybe we'll see Christopher with the team, right? For some stretches with maybe, if Eric Gordon's sitting out on like a back-to-back, that kind of thing. But right now, I think that's kind of the depth chart. So I think, and obviously John Wall is not playing, so he's out. But I think the 4 guys that are looking to probably get squeezed the most from the actual night-to-night daily rotation is going to be Josh Christopher, Usman Garuba, Armoni Brooks, and KJ Martin. I think the rest of the guys, and then maybe you push Daniel Theis Jr. into that group and you bring in one of the other guys, KJ Martin or Josh Christopher or Armoni Brooks for some shooting. But that's more or less the group that I think in my mind is going to get squeezed, at least right now here on opening night. Now that said, talked about the depth chart, talked about who we're going to see and where. I think that, with that, those are kind of just the opening thoughts that I have going into the first season, first game of the season, I should say. And it'll be an exciting game. It's going to be fun to watch this team really go all out in a regular season game, maybe holding a little bit back during preseason at times. So it'll be a really fun basketball game. I'm just ready for Houston Rockets basketball to be back. I'm a better person when the Houston Rockets are playing basketball. And I feel like, I feel like just a happier person when basketball's around. Basketball just makes me happier. It's just the love of the game. It's right there. But with that, let's get to, I want to throw out my picks for this year's season awards. And I'll just kind of roll down the list. I need to put them somewhere and just, some very brief thoughts on each one. I think with everything going on with the Brooklyn Nets and the Kyrie Irving situation, all his Kyrie-reasons, for not taking the vaccine, all that stuff. I think that there's a narrative kind of formulating around the Brooklyn Nets that if KD goes supernova this season and puts up MVP-esque numbers, and, even though he's got James Harden as a teammate who is another MVP caliber player, I kind of was thinking that might be a knock against KD, but maybe there's also a little bit of like MVP voter fatigue potentially from Giannis. I think that if the Nets prevail and they're able to come out on top, even with 2 former MVPs in KD and James Harden, I think that KD is kind of my pick to win MVP this season, based on, again, what the Nets are kind of dealing with right now, losing their 3rd star. And, again, it kind of depends on how that situation plays out, but KD is my pick right now for MVP this go around. Coach of the year, I've actually narrowed it down to 2 guys that I'm really interested in seeing, and 2 teams that I'm going to be following very closely, one of which we just spent a little bit of time talking about, the Minnesota Timberwolves. So Chris Finch with the T-Wolves. I think the T-Wolves have a chance to be that team that maybe makes a jump out of the Western Conference. I'm kind of eyeing them and the Pelicans as the 2 teams that I'm really waiting to see, okay, like, are they poised to make that jump and be out of the cellar of the Western Conference and at least be vying for like play-in positioning or potentially more than that if they can really put it together. And then Billy Donovan of the Chicago Bulls. I'm buying into the Bulls stock this season and going to be paying attention to that team very closely. They look like a team that's going to have a lot of fun. And I think that defensively, they're going to surprise some people, and they could be that surprise team in the Eastern Conference, that feel-good team in the Eastern Conference, very similar to last season with the New York Knicks. So keep an eye on the Timberwolves and the Bulls, and Finch and Donovan for Coach of the Year. One of those 2 guys is probably my pick, unless there's, again, like if a coach, just has an absolutely like dominant season, like if, the Bucks, win like 60 some odd games and they're just like the clear favorites out of the East or something to that effect, that's another one where you're just like, okay, well, we're probably going to have to look at Budenholzer. Like, I mean, it's a situation where if one of those teams are same thing, like if the Nets are incredibly dominant this season, despite the Kyrie Irving nonsense and all that, then maybe you look at Nash for coach of the year. But really like Finch and Donovan as like those feel good, like, oh, the surprising team coach of the year pick. Most improved player. I really think KPJ has a shot at it. I genuinely think that KPJ, being given the reins to the offense his numbers are going to balloon even more than they did last season. It really depends on, does he find himself, right? Does he really nestle into the role of being the point guard, and how does he mesh with the other guys on this roster? If he can average something like 20 and 8, which I don't think is out of the realm of possibility for KPJ, I think those are very easily attainable numbers for him, then he's absolutely going to at least be a finalist for most improved. If not, again, I think he has a strong chance to be in the running for actually walking away with the award. I will say there's a name in here that pops up in two different areas. Jordan Poole is a guy to pay attention to for most improved. I think he's a guy that could give KPJ, some serious run for his money. As well as maybe giving a run for the Sixth Man of the Year award, depending on how much time he actually spends in the starting lineup next to Steph Curry versus coming off the bench for the Warriors, depending on when, Klay Thompson returns, how that situation progresses, all of that. So Jordan Poole may be in the running for a couple different awards if he qualifies based on number of games started, coming off the bench, all that good stuff. Defensive Player of the Year. I feel like it constantly just boils down to like the same like four names, right? You got Gobert, you got Anthony Davis, you got Giannis, Embiid, Simmons if he decides to play for a team this season, and then like Draymond Green. Like it's like the same 5 or 6 names that like cycle in and out of like the finalists. I think it's really tough to bet against Rudy Gobert though. I mean, it's a regular season award, and Rudy Gobert, I've said it before on other podcasts, he's an 82 game player. He is not he's not a 16 game player. And so even though he gets exposed in the playoffs, his impact cannot be denied across an 82 game season. I think that he probably walks away with another award. I'm expecting the Jazz to be really, really dominant again this season. They haven't changed a whole lot. And they're just going to be good again. And whether they can translate that success in the regular season to actual playoff success remains to be seen. But Rudy Gobert is my front runner for DPOY at the start of this season. Sixth Man of the Year, I picked Derrick Rose. I think that Thibodeau with the Knicks, he's got that affinity for Derrick Rose. Derrick Rose is like his safety valve. He leans on him heavily. He was already a finalist for Sixth Man of the Year this past season. So I think that this season we'll see him lean on Derrick Rose again. And maybe Clarkson makes another run for it. Maybe it's Ingles again. But I think that Derrick Rose is going to be kind of highlighted in the Thibodeau offense. And again, leaning on him very heavily. I'm picking D Rose. And again, there's that thing of like voter fatigue where maybe Clarkson has another really strong year for the Jazz, but voter fatigue is very much a thing. And then lastly, that brings us to the award that I think Rockets fans care probably the most about this year. Maybe it's a toss up between Rookie of the Year and Most Improved for Kevin Porter Jr., but Rookie of the Year, I clearly think it's going to be a 2-man race between Cade Cunningham and Jalen Green. Maybe there's a couple other rookies out there that are going to surprise and kind of slot into that third spot. I don't expect it to be Evan Mobley. I don't expect it to be like Scotty Barnes. Maybe Jalen Suggs makes a push and is in the conversation for Rookie of the Year. Maybe Josh Giddey surprises some people. Rylan Stiles from over at Locked on Thunder is praying and hoping that Giddey averages a triple-double and makes a push for the Rookie of the Year award. And hey, I would love nothing more than for Josh Giddey to be in the conversation as a finalist for Rookie of the Year and then lose out to Jalen Green so that we can rub more salt in the wound of the pick swap that did not occur this past offseason. So, hey, I'm all for that conversation happening a little bit down the line, but I really do think it's going to be neck and neck between Jalen Green and Cade Cunningham. And ultimately, I think Jalen is probably going to have the opportunity to put up flashier numbers, bigger numbers, sexier numbers, whatever you want to call it. And he's got like the swagger about him, right? And I think that's what we're going to see as we navigate through this Rockets season. We're going to, have that agenda to push for Jalen Green, and Rockets fans certainly know how to push an agenda. So I'm expecting all of you to do your due diligence on social media and really be banging the drum for Jalen Green as Rookie of the Year, with the same intensity, with the same fervor that we did for the James Harden MVP awards all those years ago. So with that, those are my picks for the 6 season awards. I'm not going to get into all NBA teams or all rookie teams. I will say, no, you know what? On that note, I will say the Rockets have an opportunity to have 2 all rookie first team selections in Jalen Green and Alperen Şengün. And I think that's a very significant possibility to play out, right? If Jae'Sean Tate can make it to the all rookie first team last season, I really think that, they could walk away with 2 all rookie first team selections this season. It kind of depends on how much Şengün starts, because there's a lot of really strong rookies in this rookie class. But if he gets the starting nod, and I think that's the big part, right? Jae'Sean Tate got the starting nod and started so many games for the Rockets last season. He was really able to put his skill set on display, and people started to take notice, and deservedly so. He's a really, really, really talented player. If Alperen Şengün can get the starting nod by around maybe the midway point of the season, and then play the rest of the season strong and end on a high note, there's no reason to think that he wouldn't get an all-rookie first-team selection nod alongside Jalen Green, which would be impressive as all hell to be able to say that the Rockets can take home 2 all-rookie first-team selections. That would be incredibly exciting. So I will leave off with that, but I'm not going to worry about all NBA teams or all defensive teams. None of those awards. Those are too many to calculate. But with that, that's going to wrap up today's episode. As always, thank you so much for listening. If you haven't done so yet, please subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast. Make it your first listen of the day. Apple, Spotify, Google, the brand new Odyssey app, brand new YouTube channel. Go subscribe there. Check us out on video. You can see my ugly mug on the camera. But with that, that's going to do it. As always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. Go Rockets. I am going to predict. I should drop in a prediction here right at the tail end of the show. I am going to predict a high-scoring affair where the Rockets ultimately fall a little short in the final minutes of the fourth quarter. The T-Wolves blow the lead open. I'm going to say 121, Timberwolves 121, Rockets 112 final score. Competitive back and forth, high-scoring affair. We're going to say KPJ goes 20-plus and Christian Wood goes 20-plus. But ultimately, the Rockets lose it out in the final few minutes of the game. So with that, that's my official prediction. We'll see how wrong I am later. Can't wait for that. Love being wrong. With that, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.